not too bad to circle back in the middle of shift our attention a little bit. And certainly we've had some of that in the last very few years. It's not telling you anything you don't know that Abiding Christ has had and continues to have some other transitions here, which are important. And it has been a kind of a neat thing over the past, now I want to say, year or so, working with the leadership team that resulted in putting together the bridge appeal, which kicked off in the fall, inviting for some funding and for some generosity for the sake of helping to sustain and advance facilities-related payments on mortgage and debt reduction and those things, and the congregation is very generous in response to that. Some of that too, we did the bridge appeal in part because we weren't ready to kind of really dig our heels into a lot more than that. But we really also saw that it was going to give us a little bit of an opportunity here at the beginning of 2022 to do a little bit more deliberate visioning and thinking and conversation around what the next chapter or season is for Abiding Christ. And so those have already been some conversations. They have been, not the least of them, a couple of the surveys that we're going to be talking about this afternoon. I'm here for a couple of days having yet more conversations with members, again, around the theme of, or around the focus of kind of where are we going? What do you see that's in play? What do we need to be paying attention to? What do we think God is up to with us as a congregation? Considering, again, transitions, but just the onward, forward trajectory of Abiding Christ. We'll be holding next month a community leader gathering, a very important gatherings that we've had here in the past years, in which we're listening to what's happening out and beyond our congregation by inviting in leaders and partners of other organizations in the Fairborn and broader community around the focus of not just what the needs are, but what are the unmet needs. And it's going to be an interesting conversation to see how some of those are emerging to look a little bit differently coming out of through and out of the pandemic. Those things I think have been instrumental for Light of Christ, my home church, for Abiding Christ in things that move your heart and things that you feel are important to kind of get after. So we'll be doing some deep listening in about a month as those partners and friends of Abiding Christ will be here for that. So all of this is input, data, perspective to give shape to kind of some visionary steps that the congregation will be taking. We're going to look at three things this afternoon, kind of one after the other. One of them is the MAP, the Missional Assessment Profile, which we've done here before, congregational survey on a wide variety of matters or issues. And one of the neat things is we're going to be able to do some comparative analysis of where Abiding Christ was 4 years ago when we last did that survey. Then secondly, we're going to look at the results from the IMAP, the I being internet, but kind of our fancy, tricky way of getting at online ministries, okay? So we took a little bit of a snapshot of what are people's reactions and thoughts about online ministries, okay? And then we've got a few slides which highlight some of the discoveries from the table talks that happened kind of late fall. Again, conversations, important ones. So we're going to try to walk through a number of these things this afternoon, all right? So you've got copies of this stuff. Jot down what you'd like, put your name on it, keep it. This has value, not just for, this is kind of a starting point today. We're having another one of these tomorrow evening, but as some data points, some reference points to help take some guesswork out of making some decisions and crafting some forward steps. So this is, you're part of this conversation today, but then also stepping forward with other members and with leaders as well, okay? So we want to kind of keep it under our arm and be a reference point. Also, this afternoon, I'll kind of move at, I hope, not too slow of a clip. It's a lot to go through, but I want this to be a dialogue, a conversation. So I'll try to pause at some appropriate points. I'll perhaps mull some questions out loud. You're welcome to do that too, or to say, I wonder what, or what's that? Ask for some clarification so that there's some exchanges as we'll go through through the afternoon here. Special word of thanks to our leadership team that has done different pieces of getting the word out. Everything from, kind of publicizing things to doing some of the legwork of the of a bunch of things, all the way back to the table talks and the appeal, and now preparatory work for the MAP and for the IMAP and other things that are coming. So thank you, especially Krista, as you're chairing that, and so many others who are really kind of playing an important part there. All right. We're going to use what we're going to call kind of a prayer of preparation. It's going to be call and response, if you will, okay? A little bit themed on some Psalm 139, God knowing us deeply, to situate or orient ourselves a little bit. It's not in your packet. It'll be on the screen here, and you'll be invited to do this, every other lines that are in black. So, JT, if you want to go ahead and forward us to the next slide, I hope that that's going to be visible. So everybody go like this. So did that work or no? Oh, okay. That's okay. Then, you know what, okay, is that like the second half? And what's the first? My eyes are so bad. You open. Okay, so I'm going to do the first part, and then you'll know I'll invite you in, and we will we'll do all of these together, okay? I'm going to do the first half. You'll be able to hear and absorb, and then we'll conclude with this together. All right, this is a prayer centering for us. Lord, you are the God of all truth. You know us through and through. You reveal to us what we do not yet know. You bring us out of darkness and into your wonderful light. You invite us to return to the garden where we know and are known. You offer us love that delivers us from fear and hiding. You reconcile us to our loved ones. You deliver us from blame and accusation. You disclose to us the gifts in the depths of our souls. You fill us with your Spirit and empower us for service. I invite you to join me. You open our eyes to the brokenness that cripples our best intentions. You pour oil into our wounds and carry us in your arms. You show us the patterns that keep us bound to failure. You open the bars of our captivity and set the prisoner free. You are patient with our resistances to change. Your judgment is always mixed with mercy. When our minds cast a shell about our hearts, your love melts a pathway to the depth of our beings. Open our minds and our hearts to the witness of our brothers and sisters. Give us that love which casts out all fear. Amen. Thank you. Kind of an opportunity for us to recognize that the input that we're receiving and going to look at and discuss a little bit is from the church family, right? It's from ourselves and from one another. Have we got a slide right before this one? Yeah, no, there we go. A few kind of introductory statements about the purpose. This is the beginning of discovery and discernment, not the end of it. Again, or to say this is a part of a new part of our conversation, okay? It is not designed to tell us what to do as such, but to reveal where energy and resources can more effectively be placed, right? This is not a prophetic document in as much as it's saying, well, next steps are do this, do that, but it's helping to reveal some things for us. It's an assessment of our ministry's current state and the perceptions of those who engage it. It's not a judgment of it, right? It's just all of our responses to as we experience congregational life together as a church. All right. Next slide. So we've got black and red here, and here's where we've got some comparative stuff that we'll have throughout the walking through the response to the map. Black is 4 years ago, red is now, okay? So you can see 4 years ago, 2018, we had 165 who took the map, and now just over 100, which is a good number. I know you could look at that and say, oh, well, my goodness sakes, that's less. Well, everything is different, today than it was 4 years ago. And it's a healthy response. It's a healthy engagement. We used to say that we want to try to get about 60% of the average worshiping attendance to take the survey, and it used to be kind of a standard for us, and we're probably not that far from that even with the 100, because all of our numbers, everything looks a little bit different. We're not even sure always what it is we're looking at or who's where, but it's a good, healthy response. So we understand that this is kind of a sampling, right? So we're going to learn some things and have pretty high level of trust in what we're looking at. Most of the statistics are generally speaking the same here on this first slide. Age distribution, education distribution over on the right-hand side, a little bit of what makes up the household. Those are new that we have. That's why those are only in red. And over on the right-hand side, the tenure at the congregation, the length of time people have been members here, largely pretty similar. I would say, actually, I like that there's a greater distribution of those that are under 20 years, right? Over 20 years, people have been here a long time. It's a healthy representation of people who have gotten in the mix here more recently rather than been around for as long as your pastor has. So, yeah, right. Yes, it's our new pastor that's helping to tilt things back to a reasonable place. In more ways than one, right? Okay, let's look at the next slide. Here we've got invited people to be responsive to what their attendance patterns are. Kind of interesting, right? If we're looking back over what that was 4 years ago and what that is now, not too different. Nearly every week has gone from 91 to 87%. Most people continue to see that regular worship, regular engagement with the congregation is something that's important. Children under 18, miles to church, not significantly different. All right, next slide. Mostly I'm going to look at this top and bottom one, right? This is a little bit of how we're going to be seeing the rest of the map information that we're going to have. We're looking for where there seems to be a consolidation of energy or a consolidation of response. Looking for strong affirmation. The statement is, I believe that God is active in the world today. Well, we can clearly see in this one that most people here are grouped between agree and strongly agree. If you add all those together, that's some 95%. So we can say, with regard to this issue at hand, the statement, that there's a strong unity in that, okay? The measures, the direction we're gonna walk past. Pays attention to the undecided. Those who are in that middle category there, right? I enjoy inviting people I know to worship in this congregation. Neither agree nor disagree. People, we could call them people on the fence. One of the things that we've learned, and I think this is going to show up in a few different places, or at least this is my thought, as some of the results here, is that when there's a lot of people who are on the fence, what it is that happens next within a congregation, if it intersects that issue, whatever it might be, is going to bump people one way or the other, okay? Kind of some intuitive sense. If I'm kind of in the middle and something changes, I well may weigh one way or the other next. So where we see some change between 4 years ago and now, especially some of those where we had also high numbers on the fence, it's going to be interesting to take note of and say, I wonder what that means. The very last one is kind of a distribution graph, and it just kind of helps us to visually see how does this pan out, not only looking at numbers, all right? All right, next slide. What we've done is we've simply identified this idea that we're all somewhere in the promised land. We're all journeying in faith. All of our congregations, all of us as individuals are finding our way as best we can. We're finding ourselves where we are, and we're paying attention to different degrees at different times in life. It's the same for our congregations. And we've got ebbs and flows. We've got different seasons of life and of ministry. So we've kind of imagined then a promised land. Okay, next slide. Part of it is that we have been able to understand there's kind of fundamentally 4 different ways of understanding who we are as congregations. And that as we kind of crunch the data from this input from congregation, we're going to find ourselves in one of four, kind of fundamentally one of four different kinds of or archetypes of churches. We're either going to find ourselves kind of in a stationary place, okay, or we're going to be really resonant with being nostalgic, okay, might be looking over our shoulder, right, puzzled, pretty curious and wondering which way it is that we're going, or a land of possibilities. All right, next slide. We're going to define these quickly. Stationary is a landscape or a place where ministry is happening, but it doesn't feel like much movement or growth is being experienced. This location says we kind of feel stuck, okay? As we're going through these, you can be imagining which one seems to kind of define us, or maybe, we've all been different places, and so sometimes we'll think of other places too, or other times. All right, next slide. Nostalgic, this landscape is a place where the church is enjoying a time of comfort in what they have done, but doesn't show much enthusiasm for taking those next steps into the future. The location kind of says, oh, the view is just kind of fine from here. Not a lot of energy to have anything be different. High level of satisfaction, oftentimes. Not a lot of motivation or impetus to make any changes. Next slide. This is kind of a puzzled landscape. This landscape has an identity issue, not clearly knowing who or what they are, while at the same time having a lot of desire to start making something happen. This location says, which way should we go? I would say we have probably, most of our churches are landing here, or in kind of, there's a little bit of, there's some even distribution in some ways, but mostly here and in the previous one of nostalgic. All right, next slide. Possibilities. This landscape is well positioned, allowing for a ministry to make bold decisions and advance their mission in new and renewed ways. The location says, let's get going. As you might imagine, churches that are in the possibilities, part of the map or the landscape, are doing a number of things effectively. And they're, relatively speaking, there's a sense of health and vitality. That's and a significant level of energy. We used to measure a lot about the level of satisfaction and energy. Where those two are coming together significantly, what we see is those congregations can make a number of significant and even bold decisions about which way to go, and they're positioned well to do that because there's health, support, vitality that exists, okay? You remember where you were 4 years ago? Anyone? Possibilities? Was that a possibility that we were in possibilities? All right. You're right, you were. Next slide. Oh, there we are. And as we look at this, and as we've done some comparative analysis too of other churches that are now in the database, kind of in COVID, past COVID, in these last couple of years, and you can see that you're positioned significantly in the land of possibilities. Yeah, you're kind of in that sweet spot, which doesn't mean that you don't have some of this other stuff operative. I think all congregations have a certain degree of being puzzled. What do we do? How do we do this? What's different? What's not different? Just even sorting out the difference between those things are not insignificant. But this certainly reflects a lot of health and vitality. All right, next slide. So here's what we're going to look at as we're going forward. Statement. Well, up at the top right, we're going to have a variety of these statements that is getting at the issue of belonging. There are we've shifted our understanding of, well, we have observed over time that the experience of belonging or not is one of the, and in some places, the most dominant factor that's operative in people's having a sense of connecting with a faith community. It used to be that, well, there were a variety of things that used to be on that short list of what people were looking for. But this matter of belonging has really risen over the last many years. And so we want to try to pay attention, saying, well, what are those elements of a sense of belonging? So we've got a few slides that are going to be on that. So let's look at this first one, and then we'll just walk through what hopefully is kind of evident there. The statement is, I feel a greater sense of belonging in this congregation the more I participate in its ministries. Of course, the invitation, if you're taking the survey, is to just give your response. I agree with that statement. I strongly agree with it. I don't know, kind of neither here nor there, or I just plain disagree. And again, you can see in the black are the responses from 4 years ago, and then in the red are responses right now. So here we can see if we add up the agree and the strongly agree, we are at 88%, almost 90% of those who took the survey feel a significant sense of belonging in relationship. The question is, right, in relationship to an increase in participation. The more it's intuitive, I think. The more I participate, the more connected I'm going to be. It's a little bit of a well, duh. And yet we've got people here, they're not going to be able to respond agree if they're not doing it, right? So I think this also states we've got a significant level of people who are engaging in different degrees. I think it's interesting that there's a bump in the strongly agree, gone from 49 to 54%. It's not nothing, 5%. A little bit of redistribution here, although we've got a few more that are on the fence, and that certainly makes sense. All right, another element that has to do with that sense of belonging. In this congregation, I'm a part of something bigger than myself. What a great thing that the church is. I think we've so shied away from our pursuits of evangelism. Like, it used to be such a front and center thing that we used to be about in the church, and we talk about it. And I think it got a bad rap over time for different reasons, but really it's the invitation that we have to others to be a part of the faith community for a wide variety of reasons. Not the least of them is something like this. It's one of the things we get to do. We're not alone, or we get to be a part of something that's significant, is bigger than ourselves. I think there are people who are yearning to be a part of something that's bigger than what their life is, right? We're struggling, and that could be a central message of invitation. But here, holy smokes, right? There's a strong sense of that, and there was before too. So the statistics are pretty similar, but it's a strong statement of affirmation. All right, next slide. Here we're going to have a little bit of a shift here, a little more than we've seen. I would describe this congregation as a cohesive community. And here you can see on the strongly agree, we've gone from 37% to 23%. Now, why is that? I don't know, but I can take a guess that Abiding Christ has experienced what most churches have, which is it's been a challenge in recent months and couple of years to have that sense of what's connecting us? Where's our glue? Not like we used to, week in and week out, and that's just plain been different. So I think that's a part of that shift from being, we like to describe that strongly agree to kind of be that, no, I don't just agree, I like strongly agree, fist pumping, yes, kind of a thing. So that's tapered a little bit. But for the most part, the experience of agreeing with that, having a sense of unity, is nonetheless a dominant one for the community. So looking at that big picture of the congregation as a whole, the next one gets real personal. I see myself. The next, right, the top one is kind of stepping back and making an observation about the community at large. The next one is very personal. I see myself as an integral part of this congregation. And here we are statistically pretty similar to where we were. Again, we've got quite a few. We've got the largest percentage are definitely on agree and disagree. But what I want to do is pay attention a little bit here to those who are in the middle. Right, we've got about a fourth of our folks who say, I don't know, right? Do I see myself as integral? I don't know, maybe so, maybe not, which says we've got work to do, right? I mean, many of these slides, many of this, the data and the information simply continue to illuminate. We're not done, but I like to pay attention not only to those in that middle camp, but also there's not usually so many in strongly disagree or disagree, but these are people, right? These are individuals, these are members, these are people. So here, less so now than what we were even a few years ago, but nonetheless, we've got people who are not at all really feeling integral or connected, which simply says any of the ways that we can help people be connected is critical. You're here, I promise you, not because you're so critically interested in the results of a survey, although there are probably a couple of church nerds that are, but that you're here because you're connected with the community, you know? You're here because you belong. You're here because this is a part of what it means to be a part of the church family, is to invest in this stuff. So we all need a place and a way to belong. All right, next slide.
Tim,
Yes, please.
I'm wondering, I think some of this, and you're alluding to it, that COVID is part of what is probably feeding into
Yeah.
this. I guess I'm kind of wondering what else might there be if it's not just
Okay, right.
or what we might think that would be.
Yep.
Anyone has insight.
Right, that's a good question, yes. Yeah, right, if the results, or go back a slide there, thanks. Yeah, if some of that shift isn't from the pandemic, well, is there something we should be learning that doesn't have to do with that? Yeah. It's a good question. And I think that the challenge is that because the pandemic it's been such a dominant, impactful experience, I sadly think we'll probably never really know. Thus concludes my presentation. I'd be like you. I mean, that's the question of a pastor, right? Who loves the people and wants to know how are people doing and why. And we don't set that aside, right? But it is also so challenging to parse that when we have such a significant thing that's impacted us. But it's the right question, yep. Because what we don't want to do is something that's difficult or a little bit less than what we're hoping for. We don't want to say, well, it must be the pandemic. You know, because I think, well, we don't want to do that because it is what it is. And even so, pandemic or no pandemic, we want people to feel connected. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, yep. Yeah, the first 18 months we found ourselves being spectators, and especially in a place, what's that? Yeah, right, yeah, yes. Right. How would we have fared if we didn't have the online opportunities, the digital opportunities to be connecting as a faith community? And it'll be interesting. Hang on to that, right? Because I think that the response to the IMAP gets at some of that. Yep. And some of the IMAP responses will reveal the insufficiency of our connecting digitally. It is what it is, but it certainly is not other things. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, good, thank you. All right, next slide. And please, just as you're doing, throw up your hand or say hey. This was about kind of energy or excitement. The statement, I believe this congregation is making a difference in people's lives. These are remarkably strong indicators. We see that most congregations believe that their congregation is making a difference. You're off the charts in this, and you have been for years. you do good ministry. You're strong in ministry. You're dedicated. You work hard here, and so that's kind of it's a kudos thing, and it shows up in these statistics being well. Look at that. We have there's no one here who's on the fence or less. Everyone who took the survey observed or feels that this place is making a difference in people's lives. It's huge. Again, I'm going to go back to this matter of evangelism and invitation, right? That's a part of what you get to do if you're a part of Abiding Christ Lutheran Church. You get to make a difference in people's lives. Come and help. This is a place where you can come and serve and make a difference and matter. It's huge. I think people are suffering from not being certain whether or not they matter or how they matter. Next one, I like telling others about what's going on at this congregation. Again, we get a little bit of shift in intensity of conviction, especially on the strongly agree. Here we went from kind of 44 to 37. Some of that shifts over to the agree. Still very strong, about 85% in that. And you could say this is an evangelism type thing, right? I like to share what's going on here. And we've got these statistics are a greater difference in relationship to other churches in our database than your other one. So even though you look at those, you're like, oh, that's pretty good. It's not quite the same as the one above it, which is true. But statistically, we have churches that are way over on the left, right? They don't like telling others about what's going on, or they're just not. There's a greater level of apprehension in that. So you're about some of the right things right there. All right, next slide. Again, here we're on energy and excitement of things, right? That's a little bit of that intangible, right? A lot of times we can point to things. Oh, I like this program. I like that preaching. I like those kinds of things. And this is all about what's that? Again, I'll just call it an intangible. It's kind of the energy, right? Participating in this congregation energizes me. Again, take note, most of these are either kind of doing some evaluative stuff on the congregation, or they're very personal. This one is very personal. I'm responding to this. Does this place energize me? And here, now, interestingly, that's not insignificant, a rise of 8% in the strongly agree. Now, why is that? So again, if we get at that, why is that? So if we run with what I said, which is, well, the pandemic, okay, so then it's the role and the place of faith in the church in the midst of this pandemic thing, which is very disruptive. So it might mean that my faith community is even more important than it used to be, or I've struggled with finding what energizes me or where I'm connected as I might, because that energy or that strongly agree is stronger there. Overall, you add them both together, pretty same. Congregation energizes me. The next one, I invite people to participate in this congregation's worship experiences. A little bit different from the last one, right? And here we see we've got about a third that are on the fence here, and we've got all of a sudden we went from 1 to 8% on disagree. Not. So I would say I'd have to confess when we were struggling, during times to be going to church. I'm not an online worship guy. I don't like it. In my church, right? I like to look at other people's stuff. I'd watch you guys sometimes, and but I don't. It's hard for me. It's just hard. I would be. I don't know where I would come up if responding to this. We're going to do it at my church, by the way. But I think it's a challenge, and so then I think we're particularly challenged in inviting other people. Now that said, we have a lot of examples in most all of our churches where people have gotten connected through online ministry that weren't connected before, which is pretty cool. So some of this has got to be some of that. And I don't know if you've got any stories about those connections that you've heard that, they kind of find their way cycling back. Someone that shares something or invites somebody to connect, in our online stuff. You guys have a high quality of what it is that you do? All right. All right, next slide. We're going to look at these four major areas: culture, ministry practice, readiness, priorities. Well, what do we mean by those? Next slide. Under culture, we want to look at these three things. Permeability. In other words, what's the accessibility of how easy it is it to get involved in ministry? Okay. Respect, having to do, both these having to do with leadership, respect, and trust. So we'll look at these. All right. Next slide. Culture, we're going to look at some of the permeability here. This statement, I feel like a valued part of this congregation. It's a little bit of this matter of being integrated, right? I feel an integral part of the congregation. And here, a little bit of a shift from about 80% to 85% on the agree or strongly agree, but nonetheless, you're doing, I say kudos, that most people feel like they're a valued part of the congregation. All the ways, any of the ways that happens are crucial to continue to do. We were just talking about this in the church I was at over the last couple of days, and people are sharing stories, and this person shared a story of when something had happened to them and they'd really struggling. Somebody else in the congregation came to know about it, and this couple had simply but importantly sent like flowers. They hadn't lost somebody, but just had a rough time, and with a note. And it had been years and years ago that this person remembered, but that was the thing that they talked about as far as what has been a significant connecting point for them in their congregation. So there's staying power in those little expressions of you matter. I mean, that should reinforce for all of us to put the phone call in, write the note. Any and all of those things matter. And here we've got, most people feel like a valued part of the congregation. And again, we've got some who are on the fence there. They're not feeling the love or not feeling connected. And granted, there are times in life when I want to be in the back row and slip out and thank you very much. That's where I'm at. And that's what I need to do. Is I don't need to be a valued part of the congregation. So that can be some of what people want to do too, and that's okay. All right, next one. It's easy to engage with the ministries of this congregation. Now, I might intuitively think that there would be some different results on that than what there are, right? It's easy to engage with the ministries of this congregation. I think over the past couple of years, it's harder. And yet, here is some stability in the data. Shows by and large, people continue to feel like they can be involved. Communication happens, invitation happens, and there are meaningful ways. There's a variety of ways to connect. So you're still pretty strong there. All right, next slide. Here we're talking a little bit about respect, and we get into the issue of opinions and how differences of opinion are reckoned with. In this congregation, sharing a difference of opinion is welcomed. And this is pretty same statistics as 4 years ago. So I don't know whether it tells us anything different. It doesn't. But that we've got, what are we looking at? About 2/3 or so people who say, yeah, that's true. But we've got a solid third who are not entirely certain about that. And I've done enough of these to know, and I've heard enough comments, that generally speaking, when there's conflict in a congregation, like a difference of opinion is not welcome in the worst of ways, then that's going to lean to the left. Okay, it's going to be, I do not disagree with that. There's problems, right? And that generally speaking, people on the fence are on the fence often because they'll say, I don't feel like we couldn't have a difference of opinion, but I don't know that we're talking about a whole lot of things where we're having a difference of opinion. So, we're doing what we're doing. We're talking about it. We're doing it. It feels good, feels right, but we're not presenting a lot of controversial things here. So I feel like I'm kind of on the fence, not because I have a problem, but because there wasn't something that came to my mind when I'm filling out the survey. So I don't know if that rings true for you, but nonetheless, we got about 2/3 who say, you have a difference of opinion here. And yet, off to the left, right, we've got was 9%. That's not insignificant. Who say, yeah, no. It's a few folks. Out of this group, it might be 2 of you. Who are you? All right, the next one, similar, getting at some similar stuff. Our congregation respects people with differing views. That can have to do with ministry stuff. It can have to do with, right, broader. You think about the culture. We're really wrestling with differing views. And here, statistics are very much the same, almost across the board. And I think that one of the things that our faith communities hopefully that we're doing is we're showing how to live with different perceptions and difference of opinions, different views, that we're doing those things in respectful ways. It's not about all having the same views, but it's being respectful as we do that. So you continue to have affirming responses there. All right, anything there in difference of opinion type stuff? Okay. A little different here, focusing on trust. Congregational leaders are open with decisions that are made. Do I trust how leadership is operating? Do I trust the processes that result in outcomes? Am I part of that? Am I not a part of that? Do I think they make good decisions? All those kinds of things, right? So congregational leaders are open with decisions that are made. And here, this is noteworthy, that we have an increase in agree by 10 and in strongly agree by 9. We have an increase of 19% believing, affirming that leaders are open with decisions that are made. You tell me what's behind that. That's not now that's not just that's not the pandemic. The pandemic didn't make that happen. Now the pandemic might have been an impetus, but what's your any guesstimates on that?
I actually think the pandemic is critical in that because of the way in which decisions were made. And these were culture-changing decisions for our congregation. We're not alone in that, but we changed everything about how we do it. We had just called a new pastor.
Yep.
Who didn't even know what the Catholics were yet, and was still trying to move from her community to this one. There was a lot going on.
Right.
And the lay leadership and the call leadership really moved to the forefront and made very, very crucial and fast decisions and communicated them very intentionally to the congregation. And I think that communicated a sense of there's a firm hand on the wheel. And I think that's part of what you're seeing. Now, I'm not sure there was a lot of chafing against that as well.
Yeah.
But I do believe that was to be expected, and I think that that's a reflection of what happened.
Yep. Okay, good, thanks.
Anybody else, please? We were on top of that food chain, so I don't know where other people feel.
I was just gonna say, I agree, that before the pandemic, that the staff and lay leadership were still very good at being, but there just wasn't as much, kinda like what you're talking about
Yep.
before, about there just not being as many decisions that had to be made.
Yep.
And with the pandemic, things had to not only decisions had to be made, but very quickly. And so the process, like it was always explained to us the process, it was explained to us the decision that they were making,
Yeah.
and this is what we're doing. And so I feel like it helped the clarity that if we, for whatever reason, had to deal with something else that wasn't the pandemic, but God forbid anything else, that process was
Yep.
easily, it gave a lot, I think, trust to people. Not that they didn't necessarily have it before, but they
Yep.
didn't see it as much before the
Yep.
pandemic.
Yep. Janet, thank you.
Thing, prior to the pandemic, we had many things going on, so it wouldn't be too surprising to walk in on a Sunday morning and see a group of Cub Scouts out doing something, saying, well, I have no idea. And so I think that's something we might want to pay attention to out of the pandemic, what I'm meaning is during the pandemic, they were important and fast decisions, but there might be for the whole congregation, 10 in a given month, as opposed to the 200 that we have now.
Yeah,
And
right.
had before, and so that volume.
Yep.
I would also offer that the effort that was put into being
Yep.
We see each other in face-to-face work. You know, so I think the effort that we're putting into sharing that backstory, you know, on the emails, which was, you know, my kind of primary form of communication, I don't know that we want to lose that.
I
Because
wrote
it's
that
such a-
down,
Yeah.
making the process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
how does that not fade into the background, right? Yep. Yep. Those are good observations, yes?
I can speak at least in my team, is that when questions arose and were sent out by email, one, you've got more time to think of your response.
Hmm.
Rather than having to find another place to try and answer. Because some people think if you can't give an answer right away, you don't know what's going on, you're trying to hide something. So when we would get votes by email for our team or whatever, you gave them a day or two, and so you not only get the thumbs up or the thumbs down, you would also get a written response about what was why they were thinking this way.
Mhm.
And it was the same thing when you asked the question, the background of it. You got a lot more than, hey, should we put money towards this? You got a discussion, you offered rationales about why we were even considering this.
Yeah.
And those are levels of discussion that when you're running between choir
Yeah.
rehearsal, trying to get your little stuff together and everything, you don't have time to do all of that.
Right.
You know, yet some people expect an answer right away, and they don't get it, they think, okay, what's
Yeah.
up with that?
Good. Good input, right? So some takeaways, right? So the pandemic squeezed things and had some different things and some same things come out, but some of this is, you know, maybe this is one of these that said the pandemic produced some things that were positive. Better, more effective communication, more deliberate communication, an elongated window of time to respond and be thoughtful about those things.
And I think one more thing, an appreciation for the system we had before.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay,
because,
yes.
you know, we were made keenly aware of how decisions were made because we couldn't make them in that way.
Ah.
So there was a yearning and intention to go back to that and to tend it more carefully. So
Yes.
I think that was an appreciation for it.
You bet.
Most people were not aware of the kind of, as he's went, of the arcane way in which decisions are made in churches. It wasn't from top down, it was from bottom up.
Yeah, right.
And I think people saw, hey, we have access to that, and we really want that to happen.
Yep.
And so I see the teams come back stronger and more consistently now than any point in my 20 years since we've been doing teams.
Good observations, yeah. Good. Good, thank you. Very important reflections there and some ingredients to pull from, right? Okay, leaders, thank you for all of that. Leaders in this congregation manage the finances effectively. Those statistics are generally speaking the same, have bumped up a little bit, but those have stayed, I think, the same, even if I go back to a map before that. Pretty strongly affirming that, a little bit on the fence there. Okay, next slide. When making decisions, leadership considers the perspectives of the congregation. As you can see, a little bit of a different angle at getting at some of the same stuff. And here we've got also a shift as well to agree by 3%, to strongly agree by another 5%. That's not insignificant, over 10%. People are feeling that there's a greater shared decision-making that goes on. So I think that's reflective of many things we just spoke about. All right, good, thank you. Next slide, ministry practice. What do we mean by that, these 5 things? Faith integration, clarity of purpose, faith formation, connectedness, and inspiration. We'll look at each of these briefly. Ministry practice, faith integration. My faith informs my daily behaviors, right? What's the intersection here? And here, some interesting change, I think. In the middle, we're staying the same, and we see a shift from agree to more strongly agree. It's almost a 1-to-1 increase there. My faith informs my daily behaviors. Any takeaways on that? Any guesstimates? I mean, is that kind of the implications of pandemic? Is that other stuff? All of a sudden,
A lot during the table talks.
okay, table talks, yeah, okay.
They had to sort of take their faith formation in their own hands during the pandemic because we couldn't be together.
Yeah.
Even though we were offering things, but they knew they had to be a lot more.
Okay,
So it made people more aware, I guess. Of
Sure,
the
sure.
formation process.
Yeah. Okay. People needed to kind of take a little bit greater ownership of their faith nurture, growth. Yep. Okay.
One thing I heard in the tabletops that resonates with that, it was resilience, that people found their faith.
Yeah, okay, yes, yeah, right. Yeah, things got squeezed, and all of a sudden we found out, oh, God does seem to be around. I do have some faith inside of me. There's some couple things to grab hold of, okay? Yeah, good. Yeah, I think a lot of those kinds of discoveries, yes.
Well, I think in times of crisis, in
Right?
the lives, and externally,
For sure.
causes too, historically, the main cause of church is under the gun, if you will,
Yeah,
the faith tends to grow.
right. Being under the gun, times of crisis, right? That God does some of God's finest work with us, right? Faith is a part of my entire life, still dominant, right? Affirmation. So people who are here and a part of the faith community see that as a hands down yes, mostly. All right, next slide. My experience at church influences my daily life, kind of that idea of Sunday find its way into Monday to Friday, so to speak. Not an insignificant shift here. Or not an insignificant shift, maybe I'd say. We've got a growth in degree, a little bit off the fence, which is to say that, and again, I think that could be a pandemic thing, right? A little bit of squeeze happens. We pay attention a little bit more to different things, to our relationships maybe, to God, to faith. So there's a little bit of a bump, a nudge there. All right, next slide. Here, clarity of purpose, a couple questions on this. Our sense of mission is an important component for decision-making in our church. And here, there's a 10% increase on strongly agreeing with that statement. Our sense of mission is an important component for decision-making in this congregation. More people strongly agree with that. And I don't know why. Maybe that's in relationship to the kind of the bump up in the intensity of communication, and that maybe along with communication was some of the ingredients of what's at the center of who we are as a congregation. But that's always good. Anytime that people sense that that's more dominant for us, the better. The next one is a congregation. We have a clear sense of our purpose. Here we have a little bit of it, interestingly, right in relationship to the one above it, we've got a little bit of a shift from strongly agree to agree and even, but we've got some moved from disagree into maybe in the middle, neither agree nor disagree. So a little bit of movement there. But again, that matter of clear sense of purpose, how do we define that? What is that? And abiding Christ is, my sense is, you have over the years visited and revisited that. I mean, that's been a fluid, ongoing conversation about what's core, what's central, and what's needing to be nuanced. Most churches do not do that with the frequency that you do here. It's a positive thing. All right, next slide. Again, I believe in the mission of this congregation, and we have 90+% of people who say, I do believe in the mission of this congregation. Those statistics are not too significantly different. Maybe you could say that the agrees have bumped a little bit one way or the other, but those are still pretty strong and not too dissimilar from 4 years ago. All right. Next slide. We're going to look at faith formation here. My involvement in service opportunities through this congregation are important to my faith development. Some nuances here and a shift. Right in the middle, we're about the same. Still largely agree with that statement for the vast majority, about 85% of the congregation. Feels like service opportunities do intersect, are an important ingredient to one's faith development, faith life. Being involved in a group, this is more relational, right? In this congregation is important to my faith development. 10% increase in strongly agree. What's your sense of why that happens? Being involved in a group is important to my faith development. Why that shift there, do you think?
I mean,
Yeah, yeah, right. We found out we actually do like each other a little bit more than we thought we did. Okay, yep, yeah, we miss being together, in spades. We miss being together like we could. Yeah, I would agree, right? I mean, we need each other. We've found that out and keep finding that out. Okay. One of the values I think of this map, it's not even just the results. I think there are some statements that are made here that just seem like those are important ingredients of our church, that those are important stakes in the ground, right? I find sometimes there's 3, 4, 5, 6 that they just, it seems like, boy, that's the top of the list for what matters here. So like I said, it's not so much the results sometimes, but it might be a statement or two that says, that's something we need to either get after or stay after. That's just so important for us. All right, a little more on faith formation. My experience with our congregation's worship plays an important role in nurturing my faith. Has stayed strong, a little bit bump up there, and we'll look at a little bit of the results on the IMAP piece too, which will focus somewhat exclusively on worship. Very strong here. Participating in our educational opportunities is important to my faith development, and here we've got pretty strong response here too. And I can only tell you statistically that you're stronger than most. This is one of the weaker data points in most churches' MAP results are the responses with regard to educational opportunities and how that intersects. Which is to say, we have a lot of churches that those educational opportunities have simply faded over the years. And so these are stronger than the norm, not insignificantly. And you know, we've got about a third of our folks that are kind of on the fence, oftentimes because people don't avail themselves of those educational opportunities, or maybe they don't just strike them, they don't kind of catch your attention. All right, next slide. A little on connectedness. I have developed and experienced meaningful relationships in this congregation. This is a virtually unprecedented shift. I've not ever seen a shift that is that much of a shift anywhere in our MAP stuff, okay? That's a 25%, is my math right? It's a 25% shift to strongly agree. Is this what we've already been talking about, do you think? Is it the same?
I do. I think that before the pandemic, we all took advantage of the fact that we could just go where people
Okay.
do.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Yeah, took it for granted.
Sorry, that's a much better word. And we didn't, when it was taken away, I think that is something that we were.
Yep. Yeah, we didn't know how important it was until we didn't have it. Yep. That's huge. I have developed, and this isn't, take note, right? This isn't just I want, I would like. That'd be different. I yearn for meaningful relationships. It says, I have developed and experienced meaningful relationships. That's remarkable. Pastor Craig.
Yeah, I just want to point out that we're not only against the pattern here of those churches like ours.
Yep.
We're also against the pattern of how most churches do that.
Yeah.
Usually most churches will have a very small core congregation. Everybody knows that's one side.
Yep.
Or they've broken up into multiple small groups. You know,
Right.
we've not done either one of those things. We have elements of both. And I think that trying to maintain that balance is a challenge.
Yeah.
But in that dialectic between those two, they're not opposites, but they're different expressions.
Yeah.
Well, Body of Christ has made it clear through the years I've been here, that's a value they want to keep.
Yeah. Right. Yep. Yeah. Relationships are everything, right? When we do ministry as a congregation, we're all on the same team. A little bit of a shift there. Nonetheless, about 3/4 have that sense of unity. Without looking back exactly what that previous one was at the beginning of the survey, right? Another one of these was on unity, and I think it scored a little bit differently. I think this one's stronger. I don't know what the difference is between those two questions. You remember that one? What was that? Right early on, I think. Oh, on, I don't know what page it is, 1G. I would describe this congregation as a cohesive community. Okay. Right? That's not too different, but a little bit different, right? When we do ministry as a congregation, we're all on the same team. A different way of getting the same thing. All right. Next slide. My involvement in the, whoops, did I just flip all of my, is that right? Are we on 2C? Okay, good. All of a sudden you shuffle your pages and then you're like, we already did this one. No, we didn't. My involvement in this congregation inspires me. There also is a significant shift. Look at the one that's on the fence. Has moved from a third being, I don't know, and have moved. We went up 9 on agree, and we went up 16 on strongly agree. My involvement in this congregation inspires me. That's a significant shift. Ideas there that are any different from what we've already named?
The Christmas Eve service in the parking lot.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
I mean, people in the tabletops repeatedly.
okay. A, that you had it at all. B, that you pulled it off from start to finish. And C, that it was good. Right? Yeah.
It was probably one of the most meaningful worship services I've ever been to.
Interesting.
I knew it would be the most memorable. I predicted that.
We were all outside. We got out of our cars and sang Silent Night holding candles. We got out of our cars.
Wow.
There were about 250 people in the parking lot.
Oh my gosh.
When I was out there on the road playing guitar, and I was freezing my butt.
We were in the car and it was warm.
Right. Yeah.
But the technology and everything, we were inside this building doing things that we broadcast visually and orally, audibly through FM radio out of the parking lot.
Oh, well, okay.
Under a tent.
Right.
Kept trying to blow over, to do Silent Night. And our new pastor was preaching that night.
I was quarantined, so I
Quarantined.
actually recorded it 2 weeks early.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
That night we did not know, but our deacon of music was coming down with COVID at that very time. And she had stuck herself off in the corner with a mask and bubble wrap, I think, while she directed all of the activities inside this building for the safe distance. But she had to have a chance to be tested.
Oh my gosh.
As soon as she had, it was astonishing.
Wow.
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 JT up in the booth, pulling plugs and pushing cords.
Right.
It was amazing. And I mean, it was exhausting, but it was one of the finest worship services.
Interesting. Did you record it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'll have to see it.
300, we had like 300 people view it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. Oh, cool. Look at that. Oh, fun. Good. Good stuff. So, people's inspiration is huge, and that's a bump there. Some stuff that's going on. Amen to it, right? Worship experience in this congregation inspires me. Again, we've got 90% who say yes to that. All right, next slide. Getting to the end here. Readiness, embracing change, urgency, worldview, embracing change. Our congregation, next slide, is willing to take risks to fulfill its mission. Again, here's another big shift. You have a few of them, right? From being on the fence, at 50% on the fence, to 50% on agree. And
4 years ago, we didn't know what it meant to take risks to fulfill the mission until the pandemic.
4 years ago, we didn't know what it meant to take risks. Okay, that's good. Yep, right. There you go.
And
Yep.
so I think this did really change people's.
Yep, we didn't have a context to answer the question. We didn't have a reference point. And then we have a reference point. Okay. That's good. Yeah, right. And as we did it, we've done okay. Yep. All right, that's good. That's probably hits the nail on the head. But that's quite the shift, right? New ideas are supported in this congregation. Almost a dead even all the way across. And it's interesting, that's a little bit different than when that was asked earlier, in a slightly different way, but about a fourth are saying, maybe so, maybe not. And again, that context of, well, what are we pushing that's so new or that we're having to vote on, or is there anything controversial? Could be as simple as that. Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, yep.
That's the one thing that always surprised me.
Okay.
Seeing the shift to that, because, we had to consider a ton of new ideas.
Yep,
So, I don't know, maybe people were thinking ideas more in
Yep.
mission, or
okay, yep.
maybe they just, ultimately our goals and our mission hasn't changed. The
Yeah.
way we did it changed, maybe they just didn't interpret this.
Uh-huh.
I've always said that that's the way the congregation wants to behave, Dave. I think part of this is, as I said, I think I would attribute to Air Force Bowl, this church is here. That they're not, in many congregations where I've served or been a parishioner, change is something you feel. Here is change is something we manage. And it's just a completely different way of looking at change. Change
Yeah.
is not the enemy.
Right.
And I think that 25%, those are the folks that always have to be convinced that change is either good or bad. And I get that, because I'm that way in my regular life too. But not in the congregation. I think in the congregation, they're embracing newness not as an enemy.
Yep.
That's an expectation, but Dave's right, we did a lot of things too. But they did not create the sense of controversy we would have in a regular congregation, where everything we would have met with skepticism, pushback,
Yep.
anger. That never happens here. Rarely happens here. Rarely happens here.
Right. That's good.
It's good about it, it speaks well of people.
Yeah, yep. Thank you, good. Next page, embracing change. Challenges in this congregation is seen as opportunities to grow. And here, very similar to what we were just talking about, and statistically, looking pretty much the same here. A little bit, next slide, on readiness. Kind of urgency is there? It's important that the congregation make changes in order to live out its mission. Here we're almost exactly in the same place as 4 years ago. It's a place that does make changes, and no change in the perception about that as such. It's important to make changes within the congregation in the next 6 months. All of a sudden, this it gets contextualized a little bit more specifically, and here we're still quite a bit. Sitting in the middle, we had a larger number last 4 years ago, and we got a little bit of growth in the disagree here. So we've got 22% who would disagree that we need to make changes in the congregation in the next 6 months. So, I was gonna say, maybe the foremans aren't gonna be able to leave. Yeah, 2 of them are out of here. Right. Yeah, they're resistant. It's a denial response. Yeah, right. Chris is like, I marked that one that way, right? It's like, yeah. Oh, please. Yeah. Right. Right. Wait. Oh, yeah. Contextualize this. Without it being contextualized, it's like, you got to give me something more than a hypothetical.
Otherwise, it's change for change's sake, not.
Sure. Yep. No, that's right. That's good. Yeah. Absolutely. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those questions where we're looking for the response that says depends. Depends, right? Like, I don't know. Maybe so. Maybe not. Yeah. Right. That's good.
Could I ask what, in that particular question, what would you be trying to glean from the survey? Again, it is so broad, I would look at it and say, we have enough change coming in the next 6 months, so boom, I disagree. Or, we've got change coming, so I agree, I gotta get on board. What do you intend to be able to learn from that question?
Some of that really is kind of trying to anticipate that next block of time, that next 6 to 12 months. It is interesting when we recognize that there is an upcoming change that's happening here, not insignificant, and to see that the results here are not different from what they were, so that has us pause to say, well, why might that be? Some of this will reveal in churches that have a high level of dissatisfaction with their ministry, this will increase significantly, which is to say, with dissatisfaction can come an impetus for change. We're not okay with how things are. We want and need change to happen. Sometimes that'll show up in that 4B, but it'll definitely show up in that 4, well, it can show up in either of those places. So it's definitely data to interpret, but some of what gets off the mark there, I mean, the question is, what do we think that means? Yeah, so it's kind of getting underneath what's brewing, if anything.
The last time we did this, I think 4 years ago, that would have been right after Pastor Sue retired, right?
Yes, right.
So we answered these questions 4 years ago,
Similarly.
right after Pastor Sue retired, because she would have retired, and then now we're answering it 4
Right.
years later, right before Pastor Craig retires. So I don't know if that then helps too, maybe with some of the context of just a general question about why people, because to me, it's not even so much the disagree or agree, it's the 50% that are neither agreeing nor
Yeah.
So I don't know if they're all, are they waiting?
Well, and it might be that that's not, it doesn't weigh one way or the other more, because there is this pretty broad sense that the ministry of this church is solid, that it's broadly shared, that it doesn't get turned upside down at different junctures. And I think because people know that and believe that and trust that you could be looking at Pastor Sue, having been here for a long time and retiring, transitioning out of here, Pastor Craig, same thing, and that the results are still, okay, and we know the drill here.
Okay.
Maybe?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Next slide, a couple on worldview. I believe that God is active in the world today. Most people are affirming of that. There are ways to learn of God's truths outside of Scripture. And those statistics are relatively unchanged. And here, if you ask me, Brian, what do we intend to have come out of this? I have no idea. I had nothing to do with these being in here, especially that last one. I'm like, I don't know, right? What are you going to do with that, right? Anyway.
Is that just more of an indication of our observation of God's work? I mean, we see that active in the world,
Yeah.
outside of Scripture, so it's like, do I see it in God's beauty and nature? Do I see it in God's, relationship with people?
Sure. Yeah, it's a good question, right? I mean, I'm not saying that I think that the subject matter is insignificant. I think the subject matter has significance. But you'd have to take this and dive into it to kind of figure out what would we want to do with this question? What do we think about this? It's a little bit of analysis about where's the church in in a theological spectrum, but this doesn't even name what that spectrum is. That's why I think it's okay. There's nothing wrong with the questions, but yeah.
But it will give us a good chance to see how much welcoming and different.
Yeah, I think that's yeah, right. Yeah, right. Well, and the fact that you've got the majority of people who say, yeah, God's got stuff going on all over the place here, right? Well, I tell you this: if you were to ask this question in a significantly conservative church, it'd lean way off to the left. In fact, we have that. We have a few churches that would be theologically significantly conservative, and they would lean way toward the left here, which would be to say there aren't ways to discover God's truths outside of Scripture. Right. And here we nod. We were like, oh, yeah, that's part of what we're so used to. We don't even remember. Right. There are some of in our faith family that are in a different place. Next slide. Toward the end here, God works through me to carry out God's mission. Again, this is this personal ingredient through me, right? We've got the majority of people who feel like, and there's a little bit of bump to agree and strongly agree here, that we see that we're integral to this. All right, next slide. We're going to look at the priorities here. Each of these, we've only listed, and I regret, I have to send you the rest. I don't know, that other slide is not in here. Each of the priorities we understand them to be fundamentally one of three things. kind of a matter of sustainability. These priorities reflect a culture that sees the need to work on keeping the organization viable, right? We're trying to survive as a sustainability priority. Focusing growing numbers and resources is more of a hope than it is a missional direction, which is to say churches that are struggling most, I guarantee you that growth is at the top of their MAP priority responses almost across the board. And it is not generally so much because we have such a heart for other people and we're wanting to grow. It's because if we don't get more people in the doors, we're going to choke, okay? That would be a sustainability thing. So some of the priorities could be sustainable. We're zeroing in on this because we're trying to survive. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just a little bit different than a couple of the other ones. Impact. These priorities reflect a faith community that sees potential in the current way of doing ministry, but understands the need to give additional attention and energy. So we're looking at outcome, impact. We're really looking at trying to make something more happen, different happen. Entrepreneurial. This really has to do with kind of stepping outside of our comfort zone and discovering kind of new and creative ways of being the church in today's culture, okay? So here we go, next slide. These are just your top 3. I will get to you the top, I remember, I think we have 13, I don't know how that's not in here. I think we have 13 priorities in total. We're just gonna look at these top 3 today, but there's a shift which is interesting. Look at the bottom ones, 2018. Here were the top 3. Helping members recognize God at work in all aspects of their lives, exploring new and innovative ways to be the church in today's culture, advocating to improve the situations of those living in poverty within the community. And now, 4 years later, definitely some shift has happened here. Number 1, collaborating with other organizations to serve the community. Number 2, working to increase our ministry's impact in the community. Number 3, helping people experience God as the transformative or transformational force in their lives. Are any of them the same? No. That's interesting. And they're not competing with each other, but they're different. Any responses to any of those top 3? Do they seem true? Okay. Yeah, sure, yes. One of the reasons why priorities can find their way lower on a priority list is not because they're not important, it's because we're doing well at them, right? Because the question is where do we want to invest additional resources? What's important to us now? So that was my first thought too, especially looking at some of the other data.
Just thinking in terms of the way that you broadly characterize the priorities, I'm just not at all shocked that sustainability is not a priority of ours. It's just not even on our radar to
Right.
think that we need to take action just to stay open.
Right.
Our goals are to lead with greater impact and
Yep.
lead differently.
Yes, yeah, right, yeah, good observation. Right, the sustainability doesn't show up at all in the top 3. Yep. Which is, and a little more commentary on that would be to say, you know, folks here at Abiding Christ, yeah, there's a freedom to live out that call of service when you're not just trying to survive. It feels different. Yep.
And also it's an outward look as opposed to inward look.
Absolutely, right?
That have been, kind of on the edge, which is maybe sustainability and beyond, but they tend to look very.
Absolutely, absolutely. Right. Yeah, that's that whole survival thing is right. I'm trying to survive. We're trying to survive. Yep. And these are very externally focused. Yep. Jen. Yep.
That moved from being a pastor's pet project to something that was essential
Hmm.
to who we could be in the future.
Yeah. Good, thank you. And so, right, these being the top priorities, that those will be worth noodling on for congregational direction, for vision, for strategic planning, those things to say, what does that look like for us to act on that? How do we get descriptive about those things? How do they show up? How will they empower or inspire us? What are those pictures of that, right? Because, again, the beauty of some of this is we've taken some of the guesswork out of that question of, well, what are the top priorities? We get to say, well, we know. You know, if this is an accurate sample, which we believe this is an accurate sample, we can pretty definitively name a couple, 3 very top priorities. All right. Next slide.
Just to add to
Yep, please.
In that number 3, helping people experience God as the transformational force in their lives. And that 100% of the people taking the survey said that the congregation, you know, God working in the congregation makes a difference in people's lives.
Hmm.
The next step is to naturally want to take that physically.
Yeah, right.
Because if we're making a difference
Yeah.
here, we can make a bigger difference
Yeah.
in the community, in the world.
Yep. Right. Yep. And this transformational piece, right, is both personal and internal, and it's the transformational piece is for our neighbors as well and for the world. Yeah, it's this very hand-in-hand piece. Good stuff. All right, next slide, a little bit on generosity. This congregation encourages me to be a good financial steward. Holy smokes, what did you pull out some really good stewardship messages or what? That really jumps. That's remarkable. That's something. But positive messages for most around stewardship and around giving. I've got a friend who does fundraising for, it is an organization that, for organ transplants, those kinds of things. And she was telling me the other day at church that they've had she's not done any travel, they've had a record-breaking year. And so we're talking about, well, what is it about this unique time that would have, and statistically, we see this over and over in a lot of different places. I don't know why, except for that I think as things got squeezed during the pandemic, that one of the things that we've gotten to realize is one of the things we get to do as people of faith is make an impact through our giving, through generosity. And for some, that was a way to reach out and touch and make a difference. So I was all too happy, to write a check or to help in those ways. It's important to give generously of my finances beyond my congregation. Again, there's a shift from 31% on the who are on the fence, and a shift to the right. This is where some noodling at some point. Those are both significant changes, including the next slide. Given what my congregation is doing, which of the following best represents what you plan to give over the next year? And here, without even saying for what, right? Without even saying for what, we got 42 plus 1, we got 43, almost half of the congregation says, hey, sign me on for more. So now we have to figure out who exactly took this, and we got to send. But again, this is to say we are a people of good cheer, we're generous, we want to be generous. I think this is one of these that says, this is what we've told ourselves. We have a yearning, we have a leaning into generosity. And so that's, of course, a part of the call to, to church, to leadership, is to craft that way forward that helps Tim and Aaron Johnson feel particularly inspired, right? To fulfill our leaning into the more, okay? All right. Next slide. I don't think these changed from before. What influences your giving? Top response: my personal faith and understanding of being generous in supporting God's work in the world, the effectiveness of our congregation in making a difference in my life and the lives of others. The third one, how engaged our church is in reaching out to the needs of the world. Fourth, how well our church manages its finances. And fifth, the current state of the economy. I think you've got the order right here. A couple of them you could shift. I get concerned when the last two are shifting way up top. I tell you that when those last two are showing up farther higher up, there's some reckoning, there's some conversations to be had. So you got some good disposition and orientation around giving and stewardship. Next slide. It's just a breakout. You can look at it sometime between income and giving. Here's, this is self-reporting, right? And so here we've got people identifying what their average household income is. And the next slide then identifies self-reporting. In other words, we're not getting data from anywhere else on what people's annual giving tendencies are, okay? No analysis on that right now. And next slide, that is your church, I hope, right? Abiding Christ, good. Wouldn't that be a drag to get to the end of this and then somebody else's church throws up? And the people the whole time, they're like, this does just not seem right, right? And then you some other church, and you're like, oh, don't call him back. All right. So here's the conclusion. We've got a little more energy. I know we've been here for already a good block of time. We're going to look at the IMAP, which is a far more abbreviated response. Yep, go ahead.
Well, before we do that, two things. First, the challenge of any statistics problem is making sure your sample is correct.
Yeah.
Or at least a good representation. That's normally really hard to do. Except other things we can do, right? So, we compared the demographics of the sample that we got, the demographics both of the active, like, 324 average weekly worship versus, maybe we don't know those statistics pretty well, but surely we have demographics across the entire membership. And, are we in the same percentages of age range of again, all the demographic statistics? Because if those numbers matched up, you can say, yeah, you can probably get a pretty decent, representative
Right.
sample, and then, greater trust in the numbers. So I don't know if that's something we can do to just check and see if we're in the neighborhood there.
Yep, good question.
The second part's sort of the same sort of thing. I mean, normally, anytime you get surveys, right, you're normally getting people with at least moderate to strong opinions, right, either positive or negative. I would assume that most people that would be in the truly, strongly disagree with a lot of those statements just probably aren't members anymore, right? So they kind of self-eliminate, if you will, although it's good to see where some of this disgruntled is. My biggest concern is, in all honesty, right, the kind of neither agree or disagree is probably a little artificially low in general, right? Because those are the people like, I don't think it's okay. So,
Yeah, that's how they voted.
do we have, again, because you see statistics across a lot of churches, so I don't know if you have any insight on like how close off our, at least our curves and stuff might be. Because, again, in my mind, a lot of those questions where there's a lot of people on the fence might be places that you want to put the energy. You want to keep the people that are happy in the happy equations, right? I'm not saying we don't have energy there, but as far as where change happens, right, maybe a lot of it happens on some of these questions where people
Yep.
are like, I don't know.
Yep.
So again, because you
Yep.
get to see statistics across a lot of congregations,
Yep.
they're a little, you can rough out all the Gaussians and stuff, right? So you can make,
Right.
so I don't know if there were any insights there
Yeah.
that you guys had.
Yeah, those are good questions, Dave. Thanks. A couple things. One, we would have to take church statistics versus the statistics that we have in the survey data in order to do a comparison, for instance, whether or not the demographics of the survey takers is similar at all to not. I would say that generally speaking, the survey data is at least somewhat dissimilar, and it's dissimilar in this way. Younger people are less inclined to take these surveys than are middle and older age people. So I can tell you that right away, and we see this across the board. Yeah, and so that's always a kind of a concern thing, which is not the least. It would be, we want to hear from everybody. We want to hear from the younger folks, and they're not, how do we know if you're not showing up? So we can see even here what those statistics are of younger people. And I don't know what that is comparative to your membership, but I know that across the board that's less than what we hope for. What we can do is we can always do some comparative analysis to previous MAP data that we have, and that will give us a comparison there. We can also do some comparative stuff in relationship to Abiding Christ to the norms on all the other churches we have in the database. Part of the challenge, I think, is that because this is because of the pandemic and some of these shifts, I think we're looking at new norms. And so I think that for me, like seeing some of these things, I'm going to be very interested. We're just starting to do these in a lot of churches, whether or not some of these big shifts are going to show up in other places or not. If it's pandemic related and there's some sameness to that, well, theoretically, we're gonna see some of those shifts be similar in other places. Because some of those they're not insignificant. We've never seen those shifts between a 3 or 4 year block. So, but here we're saying, well, why do they happen? We presume it's mostly maybe because of the pandemic. But nonetheless, most of these samples in congregational surveys are skewed by the more invested people are, the more likely they are to take the survey. So this survey contains more people who already are here and are involved and invested. Now that said, when we work in churches that are conflicted, you'll have a sufficient sampling of people who are going to show up and take the survey because they can give expression to their consternation. And they do, and it shows up. So I think it is to say maybe that the surveys draw from who it needs to draw from. You know, because it's not like the people who have consternation didn't take it because they're mad, sure, but like I said, in churches where we're working where there is consternation, they're showing up and they're expressing that there. So, yeah, so it's, and I think some of my sense that this has pretty high level of value is in relationship to surveys that happen all over the place anyway, and are all plagued by some similar and some dissimilar challenges of looking at their sample size and understanding their sample size in relationship. Well, does this really reflect, the whole thing? Russ Crabtree, guy we used to do his other survey, he would use these examples. He'd say, well, it's like, when you go to the doctor to get your blood analyzed, they don't have to take all of your blood out. They take a sampling, and I think same in this way that we take. It's a sampling. It's not because I think sometimes we think, oh my gosh, people look at the statistics, say only 100 or 150 people or whatever. And they're like, oh my gosh, I thought we were going to be at 300, and the reality is that just simply doesn't happen. Some of the sample sizes are really challenging in some organizations like libraries, some public institutions that have a more cursory sense of affiliation, and those sample sizes can be as low as 4 and 6% of their sample. It still gives them enough to make decisions on. That's kind of an elongated, meandering response to some questions, but we certainly can analyze some of these things more acutely. Yep.
I was wondering, kind of along the same lines as Dave was trying to get to, looking at the respondent base, does that reflect at all our congregation population? For instance, 8% of us are under 30.
Yeah.
According to the survey, 8% are under 30. Is that correct?
No. Well, let me tell you this. The statistics here are 100% correct, that they reflect those who took the survey.
Correct. Now, I'm asking,
Yeah.
does the survey, then, this age breakup, does that reflect the congregation? I don't know, because we haven't looked at the congregation and compared those numbers to the survey.
So
Yeah.
I would just kind of say this too, because I think, it kind of goes to what Dave's speaking of. Our statistics right now are kind of skewed anyway, because we've really only been back in service for less than a year, right, in the building, like consistently, where we're like, everything's sort of finally rolling again. So I don't know that we can say for sure that like, we can say who's on the books, but actually people who attend worship, even if it's just online and here, those statistics are very different than what they were 24 months ago. So, I mean, we could give you that information as far as what we have on what our church books are and say that these many people are members of the body of Christ and they're under the age of 30 and so on. But I
Yeah, it's an important question. I mean, right, do the demographics of the survey reflect the demographics of the church? Yeah, yeah, it's a good question. And I think what I said, one of my comments was, generally speaking, the survey does not include the proportion of younger people across the board, even in young congregations, as most all hope. So that is to say, it doesn't matter what that statistic is that somebody might be looking at. We can have churches who have a high level of people who are under 45 and have a low percentage of them having taken the survey. So part of that is the reality that generally younger people are not as inclined to take the surveys as are others.
But I think the one thing that I take away from that is just a cautionary tale that it's not a small group guiding the choices of the congregation. You know, because
Yeah.
represented, I feel that it's not a small group that's different from the majority of the congregation that's kind of guiding.
So one of the things that we've done at critical decision-making junctures for some churches has been to separate the data, sometimes demographically or otherwise, sometimes in terms of the tenure, but oftentimes different demographic ways of doing that, to say, is there a difference in the response to this question or this issue in different age groups? And we can do that. So with regard to this data sampling, we can get at, is there a difference of perception or desire? For instance, you could do that around the congregational priorities. You could say, okay, well, we've got these top congregational priorities. Well, are they skewed by the fact that we got a bunch of old people taking the survey? Or what? And if we were to look at a different segment, do we come up with a different set of priorities? Maybe we do, maybe we don't. Yep. So, yeah. When we want to, we can do that. Yes. So when there's an element or an ingredient of what's in here that we want to have a deeper discovery by parsing data, we can do that. Yep.
I think one of the things that I take away from going through the map is that there weren't any huge surprises on the negative side.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
None at all.
Right. Yep.
If there were surprises, they were positive.
Yes.
And I think that's great.
Yeah. Right. I would agree with you. Yes, that there have not been some outcomes that feel troubling, which a lot of churches can't say. A lot of churches are in troubling. They were in troubled places before. One of the things that we said about the virus was, if there were pre-existing conditions, those pre-existing conditions made things worse. Well, churches have had pre-existing conditions before the pandemic. So the pandemic didn't somehow make a bunch of stuff happen. The pandemic, in some ways, squeezed that those pre-existing conditions have just more so had their way. Yeah. All right. Good conversation. Good. So one of the things I said at the beginning is the beginning of a conversation, not the end of it, right? Good, important stuff. All right. So it'll take a few minutes. Thanks for hanging in there. If you need to leave, you need to leave. We're going to look at the IMAP here. Actually, can I borrow an I? All right. JT, are we up on another slide here on our IMAP? Thank you very much. We had these were offered to be taken at the same time. Interestingly, not quite the same level of response. We're about 2/3 of this survey was taken in relationship to the other one. Yes?
Yeah, the first, when I went to take these, it was not clear that they were separate and that we should take both or not take both.
Ah, okay, thank you.
We're not clear at all. I'm like, what's an IMAP? I only clicked into it to find out what it was.
Okay.
Clear in the instructions.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, and apologies. Yeah, right.
Sorry, I missed what did you say?
It was not clear to me in the instructions
That there were two surveys.
to take both.
Okay.
Because I said I had math
Yep.
and IMAP.
Yep.
It was about an internet thing, and that it was a different
Okay,
survey,
okay.
but it could also be taken by the same people, and so.
Yes, okay, okay, thank you for,
Maybe part of that.
important, thank you so much. Yep, 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 yep. Good. I mean, not good, but good. Open feedback, thank you for that. Yeah, right, that probably accounts for some fall off then. I took that and, forgot that there was another one, or there is another one, I don't know if that's for me. Yep, okay.
I did have a couple people ask, like, text me or email me and say, I do not do online worship.
Oh, okay, sure,
This is a
yes.
survey.
Yep,
And I said, well, sure. But then somebody texted me back, because at the time, it was the day it came out, and I came out the next day, so I hadn't looked at it yet.
yeah.
But then I kind of understood, because if you actually do not do online.
If you didn't do it,
if
you'd be,
at all, it really wouldn't be.
right, kind of, contextually irrelevant.
That was some of it too.
Yep, thank you. Yep, that's good as well. We'd use some additional clarifiers there. Good. All right. Yes, please.
I wondered, because actually after I took the IMAP, I forwarded it to a friend of ours who actually participates in our online worship sometimes.
Oh,
And I said, because I know you have watched our online worship, would you be interested in taking the survey? So she responded.
good,
But
yes.
what's interesting is how to get the message out to the online community that we don't know who they are.
Amen. Well, and you're naming something you're hitting the nail on the head. We're so early in this and so ineffective or not ineffective. We have a long ways to go. We have a long ways to go to figure out what are we doing. We got pressed into this because we had to, in some ways. I mean, a lot of churches were already recording and streaming, but for many it was this frantic. Well, now we got to do this. So what's that look like? I don't know. We'll do our best. You guys have been doing stuff for a long time here. That said, I really think we're going to look at some information here. I honestly think some of the best value of what we're going to look at with the IMAP are just simply the statements that are made, not the results of the statements, because we're trying to provoke for ourselves, what does this mean? What are we trying to do? Right? We know that we're trying to stream worship. I mean, we know that, and we want to do it better. But beyond that, what are we trying to do? And I don't know that we're clear. So we're really at some early places in the conversation, but I would say this, and this gets answered with great conviction, is the question of, do we intend or need to be or want to be a hybrid church? In other words, both in person and online. Even to people who don't like it, they say yes. So I think it's a part of our reality and part of our future. But I think we want to give ourselves the freedom and the grace to say, we're trying to figure this out as we go. And we want to be naming these things, and because there's a lot to learn, a lot to do. All right. Okay, if you got it in front of you, and look at that first page there. Total response, we had 67 here, and a breakdown. And I'm not doing any comparative analysis, which I should be doing, but there's age and tenure at the congregation. A little bit different, as it would be. Right, from the other one. All right, let's jump ahead to the next page. Here we ask a couple of these things which are somewhat similar to the MAP. Frequency of participation in any online opportunity. So we've got 13%, right, more than once a week, 16% once a week, a few times a month, 34%, and another third at once every few months. So we got 2/3 who are once a month or less, and we got about 1/3 who are more regular than that. Here's where people are. 60% are in the local community. This is very interesting to me, right? Of these who took this, we got 40% who are, no, I'm wrong, sorry. 36% are less than 50 miles. How are we distinguishing that, right? That's a bad question. You got to talk to the company that put this together. Give them some feedback and tell them to get their act together, because that doesn't really tell us much. Although 4%, which is probably 3 people, right, in the survey size, nonetheless, 3 people here, they're living more than 50 miles away. They're not next door. All right. Sense of community. Participating in the online opportunities for this faith community gives me a greater sense of being connected to it. Okay, so we've got 70% who are participating online. They say, By virtue of doing that, I'm feeling a greater sense of being connected than what? We don't answer. Than not? Okay, but some connection is happening. Being a part of the online experiences deepens my sense of belonging to this faith community. Or a little more moving toward the middle here. We got about half who say, oh yeah. We got a strong third who are in the middle, and we've got, pushing 20% who disagree. This is an interesting thing to me, right? The sense of belonging, that I find it rather remarkable that anyone can have a sense of belonging through an online thing. I think that's remarkable. Now, there are a lot of reasons for that. I'm already a part of the community, maybe, and I see people who are familiar to me when I'm online and watching, but nonetheless, it's not insignificant. This is part of where I say the discovery is not so much the discovery as the statement or the question, right? Or how do we deepen people's sense of belonging to the faith community through online ministry? That, to me, is what's really worth talking about. Okay? Not so much are we doing it or are we not, but like, how do you do that, right? We're doing that somewhat because people are saying so. Are we doing that on purpose? Is it a byproduct?
We do know that there are some members of the congregation who were very active before COVID, who for now, this is their only way to.
Okay, yeah.
We do know there are some.
Mhm.
How many, I'm not sure.
Yep. It's a lifeline.
It is.
Yes. Yep.
The other thing is that this also includes our Bible studies, devotions.
Sure. Yep. Yes.
We went online and
Right. Yes.
this might be interpreted that way too. What other things that come across the line?
Yeah. Right. and I think that that's a growing edge, right? Because I think the default is we think about online stuff when we think about worship, streaming. And your point is exactly right, yes, that it's more than that, and I think that's part of the challenge in front of the church is to say, how do we grow ever increasingly that there are a variety of ways to be connected with the faith community. Yes?
The IMAPers, given to the members, so these are members, not non-members. I don't know if IMAPers any non-members other than what kind of that you sent it to somebody. Evidently, two other people that were not members filled it out. So this was really a look at what the internet and electronics is doing for members.
Yeah, right, which is fine, it's good, right? We want to know and discover that, but what you're getting at, right, is that is not the intent of this for it to have a broad reach, and I think our answer would be, well, absolutely, and did this get to that broader spectrum? And I think our answer is we probably think not really. So,
I'm almost certain that Pastor June invited people that were watching online.
oh, okay,
It was advertising, but you would
Good.
have to be very engaged and proactive to do that. It wasn't going to be pushed to your inbox.
It actually
Yeah.
was.
I mean, I think it was possible.
Okay.
that people were invited, but there is a big difference between you're invited, but you now have to go look up.
Sure.
Click and get it.
We sent the map and IMAP to everyone on our email list.
Yeah.
Everybody in friends, which is a lot more than just.
okay,
We
yep.
actually had a lot, I don't necessarily know IMAP, but we had non-members who are, if we had their emails, so it's everybody who's on that contact list, which is a lot more than 175 households, I can tell you that. It's more like, I think it's like 325. So it's not just, it was not just when we sent it, which I don't know how that went to, pastors who now live
Yep.
other places. And we're like, I was like this, I'm like,
We have a church that's been noodling and working these angles for a good while. They're kind of progressive in their approach, I think, and so much so that they have decided that the term member is problematic in all of this, and that member and not member is too exclusive, and so they're shifting all of their language to partners, and so all of their language is partners of the ministry. So then all of a sudden, we're not thinking just physically, we're not thinking about are you on the rolls, you're not thinking, right, but that you can be a partner in the ministry, and that their experience is that language of partnership is helping to embrace a broader spectrum of people into the ministry, which of course is the intent. And of course some of this goes way back, right? I mean, language of membership probably should have been out the door 20 or 30 years ago anyway. I've been a member at my gym, and I don't show up. I mean, and what does a member mean anyway? I don't know what a member means, but I like the language of partner. There's something about that that's kind of worth noodling or thinking about. All right, top of sense of community page 1C, and here the intent here is to get at this language is more broadly than worship, participating in this congregation's online experiences, right? Are we doing that? Are we communicating? Here are all of our online experiences, right? And this strengthens my relationships with others. You can see some responses there. And largely people are kind of in the middle, right? I can do the online experiences. Is this, what's this doing for my relationship with other people? Nobody strongly agree. I'm not surprised about that, right? But I mean, it's like, I don't know. In some ways, it's kind of surprising even a fourth of people say, online experiences help me to connect, strengthen my relationship with other people. That's significant. I think that's significant that you can have a fourth people who say yes. The next one, this congregation's online experiences unite us around a shared purpose. All of a sudden here, we're pulling this off. Okay, that's being communicated. I have a sense of connecting with that. These next couple ones have to do with kind of motivation, background for engagement. The primary reason I started to engage with this congregation's online ministry, you got to only choose one. Dominant one, it was the only way, it was the go-to, right? It was the only way to connect with my congregation. Next, convenience, and you can see the others. Most kind of had to get rolling because that's what our option was, okay? Now, for better or for worse, it just is. All right, next page. I continue, and that's where I started. This one is I continue to participate in this congregation's online ministry, and here you get to choose all the ones that apply to you. Convenience is way up there. It allows me to participate in more ways than I otherwise would. Again, that's way up there. Down a little bit, the quality of the content. They find it to be helpful and good. It's the only way to connect to my congregation. So a fourth here are seeing that as pretty exclusive. And then some of the other ones are down below there. Okay. Next one has to do with values, motivation for encouragement. I have come to value, right, over time, these aspects of this congregation's online ministry. Convenience, yep, I value convenience. I'm in my pajamas. It's not bad. My wife was getting ready for a meeting the other day. She went upstairs, right? Comes downstairs wearing this beautiful sweater. Like, yeah, right. By the time she's sitting in front of her computer, she's some blanket wrapped around her, and I don't know what, I'm laughing at her like she didn't laugh at me, right? Quality of the content allows me to participate in more ways than I otherwise would. Quality of the production. Again, each of these, I think, help to say they're not the only ones, but these are reference points for why and how online ministries, connecting online, matters. So, to different degrees. All right, next page. Expectations. Which of the following are important for you in participating online? A little bit of a different question. This is what's important to me. Online worship experiences being live, we got 3/4 almost there. About half on online worship is available on demand. In other words, you can go to the website or you can go to YouTube and find it. High level of production, high level of the quality of production. Here we've got a third, opportunity to connect with other people. So some of your online stuff is interactive. Well, most is not interactive as such, and yet we got a third of people, they feel that interactive connection. Providing opportunities for learning, about 30%. Communicate concerns and needs, a fourth. These are significant. The experience inspires me to serve others. That's not insignificant. 1 out of 5 people experience online ministry, and they feel moved to go and be about something for someone else. All right. Impact or effectiveness through participating in this congregation's online experiences. My faith is nurtured. I feel supported in daily life. I encounter hope for the future. My sense of purpose is nurtured. I'm inspired to serve others. All of those are not insignificant. Finally, get the relationships one is kind of way down there. Next page. Participating in online ministry opportunities helps me to better understand the mission of the church. Most people say either but maybe or yes. Frequency of my worship attendance has increased because of the online opportunities this congregation offers. Not so much, okay? Which is to say, probably the people's worship attendance is dictated not by the online offerings, but rather, I belong here, I go there, this is my place, I don't know. My overall activity in the life of the congregation has increased because of the online ministry opportunities. Now that's rather remarkable. I would say that anybody agrees with that statement. For me, yeah, right? I mean, that's a coup, you know? That some stuff has resulted in somebody saying, well, yeah, there's an increase for me. I think that's significant. Most people are on the fence. Some disagree, which is say it's not a bad thing. It's just like, well, it hasn't changed that for me. Next one, participating, please. Okay, yep. Yeah, interesting. I mean, I know I've been a part of like a weekly Bible study that was at least, if not more personal and connected than a regular Bible study. I mean, it was just, or I would say, it simply was not insignificant. It was very significant. We did that for a year, just over a year, you know, and every bit as important, meaningful, go to. And in some ways easier, right? I mean, you could just show up for that hour and you didn't have to do all the travel time and all the rest of it, and there's something about that that's a plus. It's okay. The last one, participating in online ministry, inspired me to increase my financial support. Most are in the middle, a little bit agree, some disagree. Future considerations. These experiences are likely to lead me into deeper engagement with this community. Kind of in the middle. Mind you, when we crafted this survey, we were trying to determine what are some good questions to ask, right? So some of these are kind of good questions and some of these are not as good a questions, but it's this challenge of what is it that we're intending to do or accomplish. So we're trying to analyze that without even knowing. But it's an interesting thing. Like I said, the statements are as important as anything else, which is to say, I think that that's a fair goal is to say we want to identify what our goals are. What are our goals? What are our intentions with regard to online ministries? You know, do you know what they are? To do it well, sure, you know, but what else? It's important to develop and grow. Oh yeah, here, you know, right? It's important to me that this congregation continues to develop and grow its online ministry. And here, you know, we're at 75%. 3/4 say yes, even though, you know, at other points, personally, it's maybe not as beneficial or impactful. 5C, I participate in online experiences with a number of faith communities. Some do. 5D, I intend to connect to this congregation through both of them, hybrid, right? 1/3 say in person only. 66% of those who responded to this survey said, both of these I personally intend to utilize. Interesting. All right. All right. There we go. Any last thoughts, reactions? I didn't see what it was, but I thought, how'd they come out on the survey?
One of the things that happened shortly after the pandemic started is that the clergy from LSIM, the deacons,
Oh, boy, yes.
But
Yep.
for me, it was a big building
Yep,
after
yep,
by our original.
yes, right.
And I
Yep.
sometimes wonder, as I listen to some of the responses, if people aren't responding to that effort that the urgency with LSIM made.
Right. Not insignificant at all. I would agree with you, yeah. Yeah, and over time, I frequently have watched and listened, yep. Yep.
So you mentioned there were some, insight and comments that you made.
Yes. And, yeah, those, we're gonna look at those and we'll provide some summary from those. I looked briefly at them and, they were mostly comments around how to fine-tune, production, you know, kind of around the mechanics of online worship, yeah. But we'll do that, and I simply, I didn't want to just post them because I thought, oh, no, I would digest them. Anytime we'll do open, free text responses, I always want to digest them in case, you know, somebody says that y'all ought to fire me. You know, I guess you're so slow. Yeah, but, so to kind of digest those, but then we'll share those as well. Yeah. All right, you out of gas? We're going to look at just a couple of other things. We've got a few slides that are a few abbreviated comments from the table talks. You were very abiding Christ, and kudos again to the team that helped to make this happen, and staff. The table talks, of course, were these invitations for people to get together, kind of that idea of, let's sit and have a cup of coffee. How are you? What are you thinking about? What do you think about where we're going, right? And then, so here were a few takeaways. First slide. Anybody have that in print that I can, my eyes are, I don't have my glasses. Or no, just what this is.
Do you want to just talk, please?
Me?
Oh, no.
What did you ask?
Do you want to jump up and talk?
Oh, please, yes, yeah, that'd be perfect, thank you. Good.
Because I sort of remember
Yeah, good,
this
good,
stuff.
good.
Okay. This is just a review.
Microphone,
Oh,
because I think if he's recording, then it'll do it.
thank you. The first slide is simply a review of why we were doing table talks and what they were all about. And it was a chance to get together and reconnect and have you name some of the feelings that you had had and give us our first look at some feedback. Go ahead, please. I'm getting real sensitive to time. Here are some key takeaways. Online opportunities were really mentioned very much, repeatedly, as a positive. LSIM. There were a lot of people who mentioned the outdoor worship and really enjoying that opportunity and that it was an opportunity. The small groups that did meet during there were Bible studies, there were a few other small groups, Sunday school started online. And then the resilience, that was mentioned earlier today as well, very evident. So these are things that we gained as a congregation and as individuals. Not surprisingly, people missed the connection that we had. There was a positive that the care calls that the staff and clergy and some lay volunteers did were much appreciated, but then when they stopped because things were starting to get back to normal, those were missed. And then I think we all know people that, where are they? And I mean, to me, that's kind of a big takeaway. Maybe someone's watching online right now. There's people that I miss, and I think there's a lot of us that miss people. Okay, go ahead. There was ministries to continue. The online ministry, youth ministry was mentioned repeatedly as something that we need to continue to emphasize. And the fact that we're not a stagnant congregation and we're not dependent on a pastor who's been here for 30 years or for 3 years. And we mentioned the care calls and the small groups. Go ahead, please. So what does this mean? Because we are, as a team in the New Horizons, are helping with some visioning but we're also responsible to get a building campaign launched, to be a little bit Debbie Downer, pay the mortgage, or, we're in trouble. So but I mean, on the really strong part, we remain flexible, and there's a strong need, and you see this in the MAP and the IMAP, a desire to continue to serve the Lord and our ministry. Without a doubt, the online ministry that was very strongly supported in the table talks needs some degree of investment or maintenance. I mean, not to mention, if I was told to run that and stream it, I'd be hosed, So JT, in and of himself is a tremendous blessing. But there are rooms in this building that you can't go into and just fire it up and let's have Sunday school. So that is going to mean some investment and have some implication for the building campaign. I wanted to personally, and that's why I sort of grabbed the mic even though I wasn't exactly invited to, thank you for participating, because it really did give us some strong feedback in the table talk. I think the MAP and IMAP did nothing but further emphasize that this congregation is ready and eager to continue its ministry in any way we can get that gospel message out. This concludes what I have to say.
Thank you, Janet. That was perfect. That was nice to kind of hear that. So it was bullet points, but a little bit of that spirit and story that's underneath all this. So a lot of energy. A lot of people participated in all of that. Yeah, so good stuff. All right, any concluding words or thoughts? A long time to sit and digest. Again, I think next steps are to say, what from this do we want to take forward? Do we want to dive into a little bit down the road? What seems compelling? Yeah.
I actually wanted to echo a thank you for participating and being here. I know we have another session tomorrow night. The thing that just stands out is that 100% of the people that took this said that this congregation makes a difference in people's lives. If that doesn't inspire you to want to
Right.
tell someone about what's going on here, I don't know what will. I
Yeah,
just think,
right.
my goodness,
Right.
there it is.
Right. No, that's good.
Thank everyone for
Yeah.
participation.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah. Good. All right. With that, shall we pray? Well, Lord, thank you for opportunities when we get to be together and we get to consider the goodness of your Holy Spirit, the goodness of your church, the goodness of our relationships and friendships with one another, the goodness of your gospel, of your kindness, of your love, the inspiration that we have from being called to be about deep and important abiding purposes and engagement with people's lives, ways to serve, ways to bless, ways to love, ways to extend compassion. For all of these things, we are grateful. We're grateful for one another, and especially for this place we call home, Abiding Christ Lutheran Church. We're grateful for the many who make up this church family. And just as we think about a few of these comments here at the end, we're mindful of folks who are not reconnected. So we pray, God, that you would give us a heart for those people to reach out, to connect, and maybe, again, a re-enlivening of ministry or strategies to make that contact and to help folks know that they're loved and invited, and to draw them back into the fold. You are one who showed us the importance of that one, and in fact, to the extent that you left the 99. So help us to have that same kind of heart. We thank you for one another in the evening that's before us. Bless our time, our families, the rest that we would have, and the week that is before us, that we would be faithful to your calling to us, that we would be blessings to others just as we have been blessed by you. We give you our thanks and we pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks, everyone.